Go ahead, Ms.
Good morning, Dr. Powell.
Good morning.
Would you please tell the court your name, spell first and last, please?
Thomas, Thomas, Powell, Powell.
And I know that many here know you because of your experience and reputation, but I do need to briefly go through your background because there are others in the community who don't know who you are. So how are you currently employed?
I'm a forensic psychologist in private practice in Shelburne, Vermont. I've been doing this for 20 years with partners, and we conduct evaluations of referred clients by attorneys, either in the civil or criminal world, and testify as requested and consult with DCF, corrections, and other departments upon request.
Have you testified in other cases concerning a psychological evaluation of the defendant?
Yes.
Approximately how many? More than 10?
More than 100.
More than 100. Thank you. And do you also teach?
I have in the past. Right now I'm on faculty and we're supervising interns for a doctoral program at Antioch. And in the past I've taught at UVM and St. Michael's College and also at Castleton State College.
And prior to, I'm just looking through your curriculum vitae. So currently, since 2004, you have been a founding partner of Vermont Forensics. Is that correct?
Vermont Forensic Assessment is the name of our practice, yes.
Yes, forensic, I apologize. But before that, you also were in private practice as a clinical psychologist. Is that correct as well?
I've worked as a clinical psychologist in a couple of different settings, one up in St. Albans for several years, 2 or 3 years, and also during my internships and residencies when I was doing my doctorate.
So would it be fair to say that you have more than 20 years experience as a clinical psychologist, and part of that, or perhaps most of it, has been in conducting forensic evaluations?
Yes.
How did you become involved in this case?
A request of your office to do an evaluation and meet with Mr. Ferlazzo.
And what was your understanding of what kind of an evaluation that you were being asked to undertake?
I think the goal was to consider the social history, the background, the addiction issues, and some of the psychological dynamics that might have been relevant to his charges and conviction, and try to broaden counsel's understanding of who this man is and what makes him tick, and what kind of background information would be useful to understand in understanding context.
And so as to provide the court with necessary information in order to fashion a fair and just sentence?
I think so.
So did you meet with Mr. Ferlazzo?
I did.
And as a result, did you conduct testing during that evaluation?
Yes.
And can you provide the court with the results of your testing of Mr. Ferlazzo?
Following my normal practice, I administered 4 particular instruments, as we call them. 2 of them were general personality instruments and inventories, and 2 were specific to issues related to trauma. The first 2 were the personality assessment inventory and the inventory of self-concept that augments some of the findings you find in, excuse me, in the general psychological map that the PAI gives you. The findings were that one of the first things we look at in these matters is the validity and credibility of responding. In other words, is the person either exaggerated or not exaggerated, minimized or not minimized, or been inconsistent in their answering patterns? And the findings on all of these tests were that Mr. Ferlazzo did not try to dissimulate or otherwise manipulate the results to try to fashion a given outcome that he wanted. So they were credible, valid responses. On the personality assessment inventory, the largest spike on the scales by far was substance use and alcohol abuse. That one was very, very clinically significant in terms of its height, as we call it in the scales. He also had an elevation on stimulation seeking and I think proneness to boredom and some of the more personality-based issues that we see throughout his life and some of the behaviors that he has engaged in with respect to relationships being, since his youth, being somewhat tumultuous. There was no indication of major mental illness or what we would think of as some kind of mitigation around sanity. There was no competency questions. He presented as an intelligent man who was able to understand the demands that I was asking of him. So in terms of the general psychological profile, that was the finding.
So let me go back because I neglected to ask you what materials you reviewed in preparation for meeting with Mr. Ferlazzo.
I reviewed the charging documents by the state, including the affidavit. I reviewed the PSI. I reviewed the sentencing memoranda and the request for a new trial that had been submitted by defense. I looked at the transcripts of the interview with police, and I was given a copy, but it did not completely review the trial transcript. Those were the documents that I was working with.
And did you attempt to reach out to any collateral sources for interviews?
I did.
And were you successful in making contact with any collateral sources?
I spoke with the therapist who had worked with Emily and Mr. Ferlazzo for a brief period of time.
Any other sources?
No.
Did you reach out to anyone in his family?
I tried.
And were you successful?
No.
So you mentioned that you were able to have a conversation with the couples therapist they went to for a brief period of time. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what is her name?
Marcia Webster.
Did she provide any background information on Joseph that would be helpful to the court to know?
I believe so.
And what was that?
She described the relationship as one that was tumultuous and stormy, but that they both had an interest in trying to work on issues. They both brought a fair amount of trauma into the relationship, which surfaced during their work in the therapy with her. She described Emily as a very sweet person who was trying to create a safe haven in the relationship. And she described Joseph as somebody who was trying to make the relationship a place of safety for him, but also having significant trust issues.
And was there any other description she provided to you about her observation of him?
He did come make another run at speaking with her by himself without her during the course of the time that they worked together. They met 3 times online with her. It was telepsychology, and he initiated a 4th contact on his own with her. But I think the issues really were ones of trying to understand how to calm down the relationship and to deal with the fact they both brought a fair amount of baggage into the relationship, which was playing out in their relationship.
Did she say to you that he was a lost boy?
She did mention lost. Felt like he was struggling to find himself.
Okay, thank you for that information. Dr. Powell, So in addition to conducting testing of Mr. Ferlazzo, you met with him in person, correct?
Yes, and I didn't talk about in testing the trauma scales yet.
Oh, okay.
I just want to put a bookmark in that.
Yes, I would like to hear more about that.
Okay. The two trauma scales were the detailed assessment of post-traumatic stress and the trauma symptom inventory, which are two standards in our field that address both specific and general signs of trauma and suggestions of PTSD. The detailed assessment of post-traumatic stress is specific to trying to diagnose whether PTSD is present or not, and it goes through the criteria for the diagnosis and systematically allows for a clinician to try to say whether the answers are consistent with PTSD or not. The TSI is a trauma symptom inventory is a broader sweep of trauma that a person has in life. It doesn't necessarily anchor to one particular event. And the findings in those cases, again, were that the responses were credible. There was no indication of exaggeration or minimization. He met a criteria for two of the four criteria for PTSD on both of them, with elevations on intrusive experiences and defensive avoidance, which are two clusters of symptoms that are present in PTSD and which in his life, I think, reflected a childhood that was difficult and parenting that was inconsistent and stressed, and that for him it sort of laid the groundwork for a set of anxieties and concerns that played out later in relationships.
And then any other tests that I've neglected to mention? Okay. So then in connection with your meeting with him, did you form any opinions or come to any conclusions about that would be useful to the court about who Mr. Ferlazzo is?
Well, I think diagnostically I would say that he clearly meets criteria or met criteria for major substance abuse, marijuana and alcohol dependency at the time of the arrests in 2021. He also, I believe, had what I call sub-threshold post-traumatic stress disorder, which is, he did not meet full criteria, but he had elements of it that were present, which I believe were reflective of issues that he had grown up with, particularly a mother who was quite stormy, and he bailed out of the house at an early age and carried with him, I think, some baggage, which played out in subsequent relationships. I think he also, there's probably evidence of a personality disorder with elements of borderline and antisocial features that would play out, but he didn't meet full criteria for any one of them. But it's that sort of, there was some noise around those types of issues that I think had to be represented diagnostically.
Anything else that I've neglected to ask you that is?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Just so I'm clear, right now, are you only speaking from the assessments, or are we joining the clinical interview, which we haven't heard from a lot about yet?
Primarily the former, with elements of the latter.
And would I be correct in saying you wouldn't make specific opinions just based on the testing without doing clinical interviews?
Very much so.
Okay. Go
I
ahead.
have nothing else, thank you.
You have nothing further?
I have nothing further.
Okay. Ms. George? Sure.
Just very briefly, Judge. Dr. Powell, I just want to confirm that you were unable to, or you didn't read through the trial testimony of this trial.
I sampled it. It was lengthy, and I did not go through the whole thing.
Okay. Would it impact your position in any way if there was testimony contrary to what Mr. Ferlazzo told you?
It would depend on the nature of the contradiction and how it fit into what the impressions I already had would be.
Okay. And so your diagnosis, for lack of a better word, of the major substance abuse is based on Mr. Ferlazzo's statements to you about his use?
Well, I believe there was, in the transcript of the police reports, there was, I think they were talking, he was talking with the police when he was interviewed by them about the amount of drinking and smoking pot that he was doing at the time. But it seemed to me that that was big. And it also came up in talking with Marcia Webster, the therapist, said that it was her opinion, or from talking to them, it appeared that he was engaging in large amounts of what she called wake and bake. In other words, 24 hours a day, he'd be smoking pot and drinking.
Okay. And so, again, if there was trial testimony that disputes that the weekend of this incident, for example, that he was not heavily drinking, if at all, and not smoking marijuana constantly, would that impact your thoughts?
It could. I wouldn't. I'd have to sort of consider how the pieces fit together.
And I assume that you did not review the deposition transcript or trial testimony of Mr. Ferlazzo's sister, Nicole?
That's correct.
And if she testified that there was no child abuse happening in the household, would that change your position?
That would be important information, and I will say that my evaluation was not as corroborated as I wish it could have been if I'd gotten return phone calls from the brother, the mother, and other people in his life. I just didn't get callbacks, and that's usually a very important source of information for the very reason I think you're raising.
Okay, thank you.
I've got some questions for you. First of all, trust issues that Dr. Webster or Ms. Webster identified. Did she say what the basis was, what information she relied on in reaching the determination that he had trust issues? And was that specific to Ms. Ferlazzo, general to life, or both?
General to life, that he had grown up with difficulty believing people when they said things to him, and that part of his preferred lifestyle was polyamorous, and that led to relationships where he just didn't know what people were thinking at any one time, or he couldn't. I mean, it led to mistrust.
Did she indicate how that mistrust manifested, if at all, in his relationship with Ms. Ferlazzo?
She did not comment on that.
Did you get into that at all with Mr. Ferlazzo?
I did not talk at great length about the offense, and in terms of his time with Emily. He did speak of having ambitions to have a family with her and of wanting to quiet down the relationship. He spoke to not wanting to be drunk and stoned all the time if they were going to have a family, and that for him was an objective that he wanted to get to, but he hadn't yet.
Are you aware enough from reading the transcripts of police statements and the trial transcripts that in the police statements he gave fairly detailed account not only of the event, but what happened after the event? And at trial he gave a completely different version of the event and had minimal to no memory about much of which he had testified, including giving a police statement for 2.5 hours. Did you get into that at all with Mr. Ferlazzo?
I didn't. I was still getting to know the case when I met with him. His position with me was that his memory was impaired about what had happened, and bits and pieces of it were floating forward to him, but not in a consistent fashion. And he did describe an impaired memory about that time. He attributed it to substance use.
I have heard that before when people don't have a memory to begin with. What struck me was having a very clear memory on a Tuesday after the Saturday morning killing, and then having almost no memory of the same events that were corroborated after. And I wonder if that would, if you could comment on that at all, or whether that really is beyond what you were able to assess.
I would say, generally speaking, that would be an unusual presentation, to have a memory deficit in that order. It might go the other way around, but not that way. And so I don't think that that would be a credible presentation.
All right. Any other questions that anybody has?
No, thank you, Judge.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Dr.